Welcome, everyone. I'm really excited to talk with you today and really dive into the myths about self-service data analysis and the truths to unlocking transformative information. That's quite a title, right? So we're going to dive into that, and I'll just start by introducing myself. My name is Michelle Schneider. I am a registered nurse and a clinical specialist with MD Clone. I have been working in clinical informatics for over 25 years, and I, along that way, have had the opportunity to take people from paper to electronic, to work with HIEs, EMPIs, to implement EMRs, all those acronym soup, right? So I have been able to see those challenges, see how data is documented, and now, after so many years of finally getting EMRs everywhere, having people enter that data into, painstakingly entering it into the system, now they want to get access, right? They want to be able to see what insights are there and how can they improve quality and outcomes. And so those requests start filing in, and they start sending those requests to IT saying, I want this report and I want that report. I think this would be a really cool study. And these are all things that people are struggling with, right? And IT and the analytics teams are like, whoa, nobody understands. They have no idea everything that goes into this. And I don't feel comfortable unleashing this to all of my users. I just don't. It doesn't sit right. This is what we do. So that's how we've landed here today, is really talking about those fears, those myths. Where does that stem from, and is it really necessary to feel that way, right? So we've got to really dive into that. So we will be able to talk about the myths. Self-service analytics is frightening for our informatics leaders. Those words, they kind of have a visceral response, and we spent countless hours investing in education and training so that our data capture is consistent and well organized. And then we really want to shepherd data analytics requests through our data brokers, right? So that we can control the message and ensure accuracy and consistency. So that need for control, though, can really slow down insights, or worse, it can frustrate users. They turn to other options that are not sanctioned or validated. Let's face it, they have access to plenty of data. So we'll take a look at that. We'll look at some of the myths about, self-service data analytics, and discuss some of the steps to successfully roll out this capability. So we definitely want to get into the advantages of a self-service model and what it can bring to your organization. Is it worth it? And it's often confused with a release of power, when it's really a more controlled sharing of a tool to improve quality of care, to improve insights, to really glean some return on investments. So that's what we're going for. That's the main goal. So as we're talking about myth number one here, self-service means self-taught. And I think a lot of times people think they're just going to throw it out there and have everybody use it. And it isn't an all or nothing initiative. So it's sensitive information, and we have to use common sense. So, it's not like an iPhone. It's not like a user can just bump around in there and get to a point of good enough. Self-service in healthcare analytics means that after proper education, a user can use the system on his or her own. There must still be accountability, though. It's important to build an understanding of data sources like current and past EMRs. When you have a data set that combines past EMRs and current EMRs, I told you I've been in this field for so long. In the beginning, there were some messy free text fields. And then, we get to the point where there's really structured, discrete data that we can grab. So, you've got PACS systems and third-party software and all these things that are contributing to your data lake. And you need to make sure your users understand that. So each of these may come with its own constraints, and it's important that your users really understand those constraints. Like, oh, maybe until 2015, this particular field was always free text. So don't rely on that one. If you're going to do a study on that, you may want to start from 2015 forward. So those data nuances will always be present, and overconfidence by users can lead to misrepresentation of the data, and that's really what we're trying to combat with that education. So helping users understand something as simple as collection date versus result date in labs, or ICD-10 code versus text diagnoses, and that can save them from an embarrassing mistake. So discrete data is the holy grail, of course, but many people don't realize that a discrete value today, wasn't discrete many years ago. So they could be looking for something like ejection fraction from an echocardiogram report, and that exists in a document of unstructured data, a blob of text, and it requires natural language processing. It just simply might not be in their data lake as a discrete value. Those are the things that it's our responsibility to train them on, and we have control over when they get access, right? So this education is a precursor. It's a prerequisite. So that is up to us to manage. Myth number 2 is that once they have that access, we lose all control. And that's not true either. So, validation is important. So you want to validate that they understand all those things we talked about in myth number 1. So it might be through formal or informal channels, and data literacy can be achieved. It takes time. And so, that is really important for us to create procedures, create the model where that validation of understanding is required. So you might say, I want to make sure that this user understands how to find all people admitted with diagnosis of X and length of stay greater than Y, and make sure that they can pull that data and that their numbers match what you would get. And, that's a very simple example, and you could certainly make them more complicated, but it's through education and validation of understanding that you can build an army of responsible users that will only make things better. And so if you make that a requirement for access, and you can include things like practice tests, formal testing with documented scores, and continuing education units as you move on that are offered throughout the year, super users will rise to the top quickly, and they'll be recognized as knowledgeable resources for their peers. And this type of grassroots knowledge, the knowledge sharing is going to just simply increase data literacy, and it can only serve to help your system in the long run. Now, myth number 3 is that they are going to publish incorrect analytics. If they are someone who's going to do that, I assure you they're already doing it. They're grabbing screenshots from places, they're creating these, rogue spreadsheets and things like that. It's already happening. So no matter the source or skill level, the risk of error is always present. And we can mitigate that through education, through validation, as we said, but also peer review. Peer review is a very important step in research and any publication. We want to make sure that people understand the responsibility that they have. So the provision of access to the system's analytics tools will allow you to ensure that they're accessing purposefully curated data sets, and you have control of that, and can also provide an audit of their activity. You're taking away that rogue access and those types of risks. And so we do this all the time and learn from each other. And when we're building queries and publishing findings, we ask our peers to review our findings, and that should be normal practice. So our users, I believe in my heart, our users would never intentionally publish something incorrect. So just as you need to be trained to drive a car or perform a surgical procedure and show and validate that you can do that, we can arm our users with the knowledge that they need to use data responsibly. So well-articulated rules around data sharing, best practices, will serve as the necessary guiding principles for you. So to just kind of put that together, self-service steps to success are educate, validate, mitigate. So the very, that very need for control can slow down insights, or worse, it can frustrate your users and they turn to these bootleg options, and those aren't sanctioned, they're not validated, the curated data sets aren't the ones they're turning to. So the goal must be to vet and educate users to ensure that they understand the data sources. So why is it worth it? We should talk about the advantages of self-service analytics. It improves our speed to insights. It makes data requests even better when they do have to go to the analytics team. What we have found is when users go in, even if they don't accomplish the end goal, if they don't get there on their own, what they're able to do is really perform a feasibility, run through to say, okay, am I onto something here? And if I am, what data do I need? Because you get a request and they think they know everything, and then they see the data and they're like, oh my gosh, it would be great if I had these 3 fields added to this initial data set. So that's something to consider, that this will empower them to do that research. And then when they do send something to the analytics team, it's well thought out. They know which fields they want. They've really looked at it and understood what is required. And that will decrease the burden on your analytics team. So you also will get responsible implementation and use through education with that validation of understanding. Those curated data sets and data validation are an important foundation to making this work. And of course, really stressing peer review. Don't assume you got it right, and making sure before you email something, before you present something in slides to the board or to a customer, make sure that it has been peer reviewed, and certainly before it's published, make sure that there's someone else in the system who absolutely understands. So self-service analytics, what it isn't, it does not mean self-taught. It does not mean by oneself forevermore. This is a team approach, and it's important that everybody understands that it's an army of users. Some people will be resources for one thing and need help on another. You're not going to be a master at everything. And it does not mean Wild West analytics. It doesn't have to mean that if it's well, articulated what the process is and the expectations. And it certainly does not remove the need for peer review and validation. That is, like I said, if somebody has that type of intent, then they're doing it now. They're already doing that. And so what it is, it fuels innovation. It is fuel for your innovation engine, and it can really churn out some wonderful ways to improve outcomes, to improve quality, and to improve the return on investment. You'll find many opportunities for savings, and it promotes curiosity. And that really is the root of all these great discoveries, is that curiosity. So getting in there and saying, oh, I didn't realize that. Maybe let me try this. Let me try that. These are things that are great byproducts of self-service analytics. And it certainly does relieve some of the burden from your analytics team. And finally, it empowers users to get answers to data questions independently. And they like that. I don't want to have to go beg for the data that I need. I feel comfortable that it's enough to help me figure out which questions to ask, what do I need in order to help my nurses understand that if they do this every time, there will be fewer infections, for instance. Or if we do that every time, we will have fewer pressure injuries. Those are things that this can allow me to do independently, a nurse manager to do independently. And so that's the real exciting side of self-service analytics. It takes courage, it takes some good planning, but I really hope that you will feel better about it today. And I would love to hear your questions. If you want to share some challenges, or maybe you've done something that's worked well for you, please speak up and let me know.